Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. Somehow, Owlcat has pulled me back into doing more Pathfinder content. And it's got me thinking about videos I didn't get a chance to do before that I'd really like to do now. It's been 1 year since Baldur 3 released, and I've seen quite a few content creators dive into the conversation of which game is better, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous or Baldur's Gate 3. I'd love to throw my hat in the ring and give you all my 2 cents. Let's go ahead and compare these two titans of the CRPG landscape. Please note this video will be spoiler free, outside of talking about hidden mechanics you can unlock. Otherwise, all the information present you can pick up from watching the trailers. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments regarding which game you believe is better. I will continue to cover both games extensively, so be sure to subscribe to the channel and get all the future videos. I also live stream on both YouTube and Twitch. To engage in this discussion fairly, we'll compare both games across several categories: production value, character creation, build mechanics, progression, combat, story, companions, music, endings, mods, and finally, replayability. Again, no spoilers, just my general thoughts. Let's go ahead and start with the easiest category in the list: production value. This is where we compare how the games look, the quality of the animations, and the voice acting performances. Wrath of the Righteous is probably the best looking isometric CRPG you can buy. Character models have fantastic levels of detail, from the spider legs protruding out of Windwalk's back to the golden hair and angelic features of Darren. Combat animations and spells feel very impactful, and in some instances flat out light up the screen. There's also a wide variety of beautifully drawn environments for you to explore. Characters are static for the most part during conversations, but to help make up for that, most of the significant NPCs have portraits. These portraits provide a better visual representation of what the character looks like, and many of them are absolutely gorgeous. One major drawback is that Wrath of the Righteous only has a limited amount of voice acting. What voice acting is present sounds outstanding, but there are many critical moments where you have to just read the text. In comparison, Baldur's Gate 3 isn't just one of the best looking CRPGs you can buy, it's one of the best looking games of all time. No matter where you are, what you are doing, or who you are playing as, everything looks gorgeous and spectacular. The game is also completely voice acted, and the performances are strong almost across the board. Conversations are also fully animated, which makes the voice acting even more enthralling. I really don't think there's any reason to dig deep into this category. BG3 clearly has higher production values and wins this easily. The next category is character creation. In both games, you choose your class during character creation, but we're going to hold off on that comparison and deal with that in the mechanics section. So for now, we'll deal with all aspects of character creation that don't include picking your class. Baldur's Gate 3 starts you off by deciding what origin you prefer for your character. This allows you to pick someone with a unique history who have unique interactions in the game. This also gives you a face you wouldn't be able to replicate in character creation. The Dark Urge option also provides unique interactions while letting you create your own face. You can also play with a completely blank slate. Wrath of the Righteous lets you play a prepackaged character, but they get no special interactions, so essentially, no matter what, you are playing as a blank slate. Both games provide the usual human, elf, dwarf, half-orc, and tiefling race options, along with a host of sub-races to choose from. BG3 throws a curveball by also providing Githyanki and Dragonborn options as well. The implementation of both races is spectacular, providing you with unique interactions throughout the game. They also look fantastic, with Dragonborn most especially standing out due to the incredible degree to which their scales can be customized. Pathfinder throws its own curveball by letting you play as an Oread, Aasimar, or Dhampir. Visually, these choices are all very distinctive from their peers, and they each provide unique mechanics as well. Unfortunately, Pathfinder is light on race-specific reactivity, so from a thematic standpoint, a lot of the impact these choices provide is in your head. It's worth noting that each race has an exclusive class that can only be used if you select this option. Some of them have really awesome mechanics that reinforce the type of character you want to play, and Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't have anything similar. D&D, and by extension Baldur's Gate 3, shied away from tying your race to specific changes in your ability scores. So for example, choosing Dragonborn doesn't give you a bonus in strength and charisma. In comparison, Pathfinder goes all in on your race, impacting the scores that you start out with. BG3 also has sub-races, which each add a small buff or mechanic to your character. The cool thing about this is whatever the subclass provides is added on top of the base class. Pathfinder has racial heritages which serve the same purpose, but if you select one, then it will wipe most of the bonuses your base class provides, so the system isn't nearly as flexible. Pathfinder allows you to select a background which provides you with proficiency in a weapon or skill or some other small buff. Most of them are not game-changing, and there is no in-game reactivity to your choice. Baldur's Gate 3 also has backgrounds, and they provide proficiency into skills. In addition, a character's background determines how they become inspired. When you fail a dice roll, you can use inspiration points to attempt the roll again. You gain these points by completing actions consistent with your background, such as selecting the criminal option and then stealing from someone. Consequently, while there is no direct background reactivity, there is a mechanic that rewards you for sticking with a specific theme, and that is definitely interesting. BG3 allows you to place points in a typical D&D list of abilities, such as strength or dexterity. This system completely holds your hand. You cannot raise an ability above 17, and you cannot drop it below 8, to help ensure players don't create a build that is completely broken. Similarly, what skills you can take proficiency in is limited by the other options you have chosen in character creation. In comparison, Pathfinder lets you break yourself if that's what you want to do. Any ability can potentially be reduced to 5 or raised up to 20. This allows you to create characters with huge weaknesses in favor of very specific strengths, something that again, BG3 limits you from doing. Pathfinder allows you to make changes on your character model, but for the most part the settings are rudimentary because you spend the vast majority of time looking at your portrait and not your actual character. Pathfinder allows you to select from portraits that were available in the prequel Kingmaker and adds new ones. Because the number of portraits is large, it creates an illusion of variety, but honestly, it's very easy to create a character that cannot be accurately represented by what's available here. There's a significant lack of non-human options, and most of the black male portraits you see are actually characters that already exist in the game. There's only one who is unique. There is an option to import photos to use in the game, but it requires you to manually resize them and place them in the proper folder, which obviously is a task many players will not be up to. Comparatively, Baldur's Gate 3's character creation system has a strong emphasis on inclusivity. Just about every shade you can think of is available for a wide swath of characters, and it's a very simple process to create characters who look flat out amazing. This category is much closer than production values, but it's still clear that Baldur's Gate 3 has the superior character creation system. I don't like how D&D handles races, and BG3 holds your hand more than I prefer, but there's just too many other pluses for Pathfinder to win here. The next category is build mechanics. This is where we compare both games' classes and how fun or interesting it is to create builds in both games. Baldur's Gate 3 provides you with 12 base classes: Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. Pretty much a standard list of classes you would see in a game. Each of these classes has at least 3 subclasses, which essentially serve as specializations. You'll be able to select a subclass when you reach a particular level in the base class. BG3 also allows you to multi-class at any time, and there are no limitations on which class you can choose. This means your build can potentially have multiple classes and subclasses all working together to make you great. There are over 40 feats in Baldur's Gate 3. These options significantly help to flesh out your character by raising your stats and defenses or providing unique offensive capabilities. When you can select a feat is determined by your class. Most classes won't let you take a feat until level 4, and the max level is 12, so you can get 3 of them. This adds additional complexity when multi-classing because you can potentially miss out on one or multiple feats due to how you jump between classes. The scope of what Baldur's Gate 3 allows a player to do with their builds pales in comparison to what you can do in Wrath. There are 25 base classes, which include all the options BG3 has except Warlock, and then also adds on Alchemist, Arcanist, Blood Rager, Cavalier, Hunter, Kineticist, Magus, Oracle, Shaman, Shifter, Skald, Slayer, War Priest, and Witch. All of these base classes have at least 5 subclasses. These subclasses are not specializations. Instead, they are basically classes unto themselves, removing some functionality from the base class while providing something new and potentially giving the player a better option. For the most part, you are free to multi-class, except there are some classes which require a specific alignment, such as Paladin, which requires you to be good aligned. There is also a list of prestige classes which have certain requirements that must be met before they can be selected, such as ranks in a particular skill or reaching a certain spell level. There's a list of over 100 feats you can choose from. Unlike BG3, for the most part, when you get feats is tied to your character level instead of your class level. This means you can freely multi-class with no concern for losing out on feats. You gain a feat every other level, so you'll get at least 10 over the course of your adventure. Altogether, this means that Wrath provides 10 times the options that you have in BG3 when it comes to crafting a build. That might make you think Wrath takes this category in a landslide, but pump your brakes because things are not quite that clear cut. Yes, Baldur's Gate 3 has significantly less classes and options, but just about everything you can do is crystal clear. It's laid out in plain English and easy even for brand new players to understand. Even better, if you screw up your build, the process to respec is smooth to use. In contrast, many mechanics in Pathfinder are about as clear as mud. Even if you carefully read, sometimes it's only through experimentation that you discover certain things don't work, or work in a way that's not immediately apparent. Making matters worse, the respec system is absolutely atrocious, locking you into a menu that you cannot exit out of until all character and mythic levels have been selected. That means if you make a mistake, you cannot just exit out and start over again. It also means if you are experimenting, you cannot stop leveling to test out a spell or ability that you have never used before. It's significantly more cumbersome than what you have to deal with in BG3. Wrath does win this category because the wealth of classes, feats, and spells available to you so clearly dwarfs BG3, and it significantly adds to the replayability of this game. That being said, Baldur's Gate 3 is much more accommodating for new fans, and that cannot be discounted. The next category is progression. This is where we compare how both games make you feel more powerful as the campaign progresses. Both games provide you with a wealth of armor, weapons, and accessories to fit virtually all types of builds. Pathfinder provides a larger selection of equipment with a wider range of power since you can get up to +5 items, whereas BG3 limits you to 12 levels and consequently you don't receive equipment that's quite that powerful. On the flip side, I'd argue BG3 goes to greater lengths to provide equipment that complements each other, rewarding players for having completely synchronized sets. Pathfinder also provides you with a mythic path. During the story, you will choose to follow the path of an otherworldly entity, whether it be an angel, demon, lich, azada, eon, devil, gold dragon, trickster, or even a swarm. These paths are mutually exclusive and add a ton of content into the game via mythic quests, abilities, spells, and passives. Each one is completely different and oftentimes will place you in the path of completely different NPCs. Most of them have powerful mechanics that significantly change your builds. By the end of Pathfinder, not only are you a level 20 character, but you have also maxed out your mythic path and completed a transformation into another creature entirely. More than any other game I have played, the end of Pathfinder makes you feel like an all-powerful being. BG3 doesn't have anything close to that. You do gain access to a separate set of abilities that you can slowly tap into more as the game progresses. This is no story influence. What's available to you is always the same every playthrough, and while the effects are powerful, they don't reach the level of impact mythic paths provide in Pathfinder. This category isn't close. Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous provides a significantly more engaging progression system that also adds a ton of replayability to the game. Baldur's Gate 3's progression feels weak in comparison. The next category is combat. Wrath of the Righteous allows you to switch back and forth between turn-based and real-time with pause mode, giving you a ton of flexibility in how you approach enemies within the game. Its combat system will be at least somewhat familiar to anybody who has played a tabletop game. You can move a certain amount while taking a swift, free, or standard action. Enemies abide by the same rules, outside of some bosses who have mythic abilities that allow them to bend the rules a bit. To recharge limited use abilities, you have to take a rest. There's only a small number of rests you can take out in the world without incurring major penalties, so the game forces you to regularly return to home base. In comparison, Baldur's Gate 3 is strictly turn-based. This means combat is slower than what you can get in Wrath, but Larian has made significant changes so that BG3's combat feels a lot more snappy than almost any other turn-based game. A big advantage BG3 has over Wrath is that all of its encounters are handcrafted. Wrath has a ton of random encounters you can experience on the world map, or small, meaningless fights that the devs just kind of throw into levels to keep you swinging at something. Fights in BG3 feel more purposeful and are constructed in such a manner that you really have to think through the encounter. BG3 almost always allows you to rest. Your camp is essentially the home base, and consequently, there's nothing that pulls you away from exploring the vast world. It also means most of the time, you don't have to be conservative with your limited use spells or abilities. Resting requires food, but that is very plentiful throughout your journey, so you can basically go all out every single fight. That's a double-edged sword, because it also makes BG3 a much easier game. Higher difficulties increase the cost to rest and give enemies legendary actions, but it's not really possible to create a BG3 experience that flat out feels unfair and slanted against the player. In comparison, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous is arguably the most difficult CRPG in existence when cranked up to its highest level. Each encounter becomes an all-out fight for survival, and enemies are nothing short of merciless. There's a lot of people online who like to claim they have conquered this difficulty, but a quick glance at Steam's achievements make it clear that the vast majority of them are just full of hot air. Overall, I give the win to Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. Being able to switch back and forth between real-time with pause and turn-based is huge, and keeps combat moving at the exact speed the player is comfortable with. BG3 has excellent set pieces, and I like the rest system more, but Wrath still wins out. Next up, we have the story category. Baldur's Gate 3 places you in the role of a person who has been kidnapped and had a tadpole placed inside their head. You quickly escape from your captors, but now must figure out how to remove this tadpole without destroying yourself in the process. Making matters worse, there are other characters with tadpoles in their heads, and many of them are bent on world domination. A handful of them will join you, but most of them will be adversaries with powerful abilities. No question, BG3's story is a major triumph, and going through it was one of the best experiences I've ever had as a gamer. Unfortunately, the narrative suffers in part because the overall game gets worse as you progress instead of getting better. Act 1 is stunning front to back. Act 2 has some really high moments and focuses on the best villain in the overall game, but it's just not quite as impressive. Act 3 is undoubtedly the worst portion of the game, focusing on the weakest villains and feeling the most disjointed. That negative progression bleeds into the story and makes significant moments less impactful than they should be. Wrath of the Righteous has you playing as a character who wakes up injured and with no memory in the middle of a festival. The amnesia angle has been done to death in games, but it's not really a focus here. It's just an easy way for the developers to let you play with a blank slate. Very quickly, the festival is overrun by demons, and you discover two powerful demon lords are attempting to rise up from the abyss and take over the entire country. You join the resistance and soon are put in charge of the crusade responsible for pushing back against the demonic takeover. Unlike BG3, in most ways, Wrath's story gets better the deeper you get into the game. Acts 1 and 2 feel like setups building towards an epic conflict. Act 3 blows everything wide open while providing significant revelations both in the main story and your mythic plot. This entire time, you only hear about the game's major villains, you almost never see them. Acts 4 and 5 change that and put you in direct conflict with powerful creatures you have spent 50 hours learning about. Consequently, even though you interact with Wrath's villains much less than in BG3, they end up feeling much more developed and impactful. Wrath has a massive number of potential endings that vary not only based on decisions made in your main quest, but also what occurs in your mythic path and with your party members. There's also an extremely difficult to achieve secret ending that radically changes a large portion of your ending slides. Pretty much regardless of what you do, Wrath just has one of the best endings you can experience in an RPG. At launch, BG3 had absolutely paltry endings that were completely unworthy of the epic adventure that had preceded them. Larian has added more content to help flesh this out, and they are much better now, but still don't nearly compare to the level of satisfaction you get from completing Wrath's storyline. It's competitive, but I think Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous has the better story arc, and without question, it provides a larger selection of fantastic endings, most of which are much stronger than the endings you get in Baldur's Gate 3. The next category is companions. Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous provides you with 12 companions and one half companion that's a talking weapon. There's also one additional full companion you can purchase via DLC. In addition, there are 2 hidden companions and a handful of party members who can only be accessed by specific mythic paths. The vast majority of these companions will be given to you in the first 30 hours of your 100-hour adventure, so it's usually easy to get the exact squad that you want. Unlike most modern games, Pathfinder lets you use a team of 6 party members, including your character. This means you'll always have access to a varied mix of banter and mechanics. Across the board, companions are well written and the banter is fantastic, sometimes in very surprising ways. As I mentioned earlier, some of the party members have very striking visual designs, such as Windowog with her cat eyes and spider legs protruding from her back. All of them have personal quests that are very entertaining to complete, and most of them have character arcs that can significantly change their personalities by the end of the game. Almost half of your party members can be romanced, depending on your gender and what mythic path you have taken. Owlcat did a fantastic job with this aspect of the game, and most of the romances get quite a bit of content. Wrath's campaign occurs over the course of a year, which provides a lot of time for the romance to breathe and grow. Also, how the romance is represented in the end slides can change based on your actions. You can have a relationship with someone, but the connection isn't strong enough, and consequently, betrayal is still possible. Only a soulmate connection will provide ending slides where you happily stay together forever, and it's quite difficult to achieve this status with your partner. When you do, it absolutely feels like the two characters have fallen in love. Baldur's Gate 3 gives you 10 companions, but it doesn't feel that way, because for almost a third of the game, you only have access to 6, and then the final 4 are slowly doled out to you. Consequently, even though all of them are well written, there's a large disparity in how much content each party member receives. Nothing is done to catch up the final 4 party members with the originals. Also, you are only limited to a party of 4, including your main character. This means you'll quickly become comfortable with half of your initial group, and it's quite difficult to justify including later options in the rotation. In addition, nearly half of your party members don't have actual character arcs. They just have tasks they need help completing. It doesn't feel like anything has changed or developed about them by the end of the game. However, for those characters who do have arcs, some really masterful work has been done to breathe life into them. The party members are another area where the heightened production values truly shine. All of them are incredibly well voice acted, and the animated interactions you can have with them are quite memorable. As mentioned before, there are large sections of Wrath that have no voice acting, and you are forced to read companion dialogue. I would argue Wrath's party members are better written, but the production values are so lopsided that some pivotal companion scenes in BG3 just hit harder. This is most especially true during romantic and flirtation scenes. I think Wrath does romance better overall because, again, the party members are written better and there's much more time for the relationships to breathe and grow. That being said, Larian Studios put a ton of effort into the intimacy scenes you experience throughout the game. This doesn't just apply to sexual interactions, but also flirting, kissing, or almost kissing. Many of these scenes are quite moving in ways Wrath cannot possibly mimic. Unfortunately, the events of BG3 only take around 3 or 4 months in game time. Because of this, the romances don't have time to grow, and they don't feel nearly as deep as what you get in Wrath. Most BG3 romances end with the characters feeling like very good friends instead of lifelong partners. Some of the Wrath romances feel like the two of you are going to be connected even in the afterlife. Bottom line, I think Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous wins this category. Better written friendships, better written romances, significantly larger pool of party members, and more of them have full character arcs. That being said, BG3's companions will still be much easier for some players to digest since they are fully animated and voice acted. The next category on the list is music, and I'm going to say right up front, both of these games have absolutely phenomenal scores. Whether you're in combat, engrossed in a spirited debate with a companion, or kissing your lover, both games have songs that just knock it out of the park. Pathfinder's music is more in your face and impactful. There's a large emphasis on horns, and many of the songs almost feel like a military marching band announcing your arrival. If I listen to the soundtrack on its own, I would say it really doesn't fit in a fantasy setting, but in the game, it absolutely works. BG3, on the other hand, has a soundtrack that fits a fantasy setting like a glove and makes the player feel like they are in a mystical place. Baldur's Gate 3 has 2 songs that, in my opinion, really separate it from Wrath. The first song is Down by the River, which at this point is an iconic track that pretty much forces you to stop and listen. Everything from the composition to the singing is outstanding. Wrath has a couple of tracks where you hear a voice, but nothing that comes close to River. I'll leave the other track unnamed, but it's a theme song for a major optional boss. The track is great even if you know nothing about the boss or the game. By the time it plays, you are close to the end of the game and know a lot more about that character, and it makes the song several times better. Wrath doesn't have any tracks like this, where the game is built up to a confrontation and then a track plays that adds even more layers to the fight. It's yet another iconic moment for BG3. Don't think BG3 runs away with this category though, because there's actually something that Wrath's score does that BG3 doesn't touch at all. Wrath has a variety of tracks that only play during different playthroughs. Each mythic path you can select has a unique song that you'll hear while at home base and at pivotal moments throughout the game. These tracks are wholly unique, they don't sound like any other tracks you hear throughout the game, and you only hear them if you have the correct mythic path selected. All of them are absolutely fantastic and fit the tone of your path very well. Consequently, Wrath makes it feel like your character has their very own theme song. In a close bout, I give the nod to Baldur's Gate 3. I think its highs are too much for Wrath to overcome, and there are many moments in the game that are iconic specifically due to the music. That being said, the way mythic paths interact with the music in Wrath is a very unique experience that's well worth considering. The last category, but certainly not least, is replayability. Baldur's Gate 3 allows you to select an origin character for your playthrough. Technically, choosing different origins will result in significantly different runs, but honestly in practice it doesn't work that way, because the vast majority of BG3's reactivity is based around what you do, not who you are. There's only a little racial reactivity unless you are playing a rare option, such as Gith Yankee or Drow. The origin characters are mostly complete unknowns, so playing different options doesn't radically change the dialogue or situations you experience. You get a couple of unique cutscenes based on a particular character's viewpoint, but otherwise, playing as different origins doesn't really result in a significantly different playthrough. The exception to this is the Dark Urge origin, which provides significantly more information about the main quest and a very different experience compared to any other way you can play the game. Unlike the other origins, Dark Urge is not a party member, so either you play as that character or you never see them in the game. For some players, just spinning up a new character is reason enough to replay a game, and in that case, BG3's production values will once again shine through. All of the different races look fantastic, and there are a ton of different options to set up your character's look. The wealth of classes and equipment also mean it'll be impossible to explore all of the build options in one go. One thing that BG3 has over Pathfinder in this category is a very healthy modding community. There's a ton of mods for races and classes that didn't come with the game, along with quality of life updates or just cool things you couldn't do otherwise. Larian is also adding full modding support in September, which will undoubtedly spur a host of additional mods for the game that will make additional playthroughs more interesting. Wrath of the Righteous certainly has some mods, but honestly the community isn't as large as what you would think for a game that's this popular. There are some really nice quality of life options that can certainly enhance your playthrough, but there's definitely room to grow. Unfortunately, Owlcat has no plans to add modding support, so this will likely never change. As mentioned previously, Pathfinder has a list of mutually exclusive mythic paths that each provide significant story content and mechanics. This adds a ton of replayability to the game, as each path basically feels like a separate run. Wrath has even less racial reactivity than BG3, and the visual aspect of character creation is not nearly as impactful. It does allow all characters to select a deity, and there is some reactivity towards that choice, including some instances where your mythic path will provide unique content based on your deity selection. Wrath also has over 200 classes and a wealth of equipment to provide players with an endless amount of build options for different playthroughs. Owlcat has released multiple DLCs for the game that provide story beats where you can make decisions and additional content for your party members. Larian has already confirmed they will release no story DLC for Baldur's Gate 3. The area where BG3's replayability really falls apart is in evil playthroughs. A good aligned BG3 playthrough is an incredible experience that honestly any fan of the genre should go through. An evil playthrough pales in comparison, locking you out of several party members and significantly reducing the quest and equipment you receive. All the way around, it's pretty clear Larian didn't believe this portion of the game was worth nearly the same effort. In contrast, Wrath has some of the best evil aligned playthroughs you can experience in a game. Some party members will leave, but you'll also get quests and content that good aligned players will never receive. It's also possible to corrupt or harden party members, which you cannot do in BG3. The spectacular endings I previously mentioned are absolutely available for most cruel playthroughs. Overall, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous wins this category in a landslide. I'd say you can get a good 3 playthroughs out of BG3 before it gets stale. Wrath, on the other hand, has 20 plus runs that will all feel very distinctive from each other. It's honestly one of the most replayable games that you can purchase. So what does it all come down to? No big surprise, but in my opinion, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous is the better game. Baldur's Gate 3 has significantly higher production values, is much more welcoming for new players, and without question, it's one of the greatest CRPGs ever made. That being said, Wrath provides a better story, especially when you include the Mythic Path content and a much better sense of progression. Its characters are written better, and the relationships you can form feel stronger than what you get in BG3. Without a doubt, both games are well worth playing, but if you can only choose one and aren't afraid of a little bit of challenge, I would say Wrath is the game you should pick up. That's all for this video, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Which one do you feel is better? Which game have you been playing most recently? Are you looking forward to Patch 7, the new update from Larian Studios for Baldur's Gate 3? Are you looking forward to the next Pathfinder game that Owlcat is going to create? Looking forward to reading all of your feedback, and I hope all of you enjoyed this video. Take care.